Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday, TGIF. It is a beautiful day out there in the Northwest. I hope you're all getting out there. I know my guest today is because he just told me he's gonna. But before I bring him on, I am Brian Emhauser. You can find me on Twitter at HawkBlogger, and we've had a great week. Talking Seahawks, talking to some of the new Seahawks, Mike Jarrell, Byron Murphy. Talked to Byron Murphy's high school coach, Claude Mathis, yesterday from DeSoto. A lot of good stuff. Got to see Byron Murphy get introduced at the VMAC yesterday. So happy to see our new draft picks getting introduced to Seattle with the best weather we have to offer this time of year. And then we get to finish this week off with a return of the very first guest on Hawk Blogger Mornings, episode 3. I went from doing a solo act to bringing other people on stage, and this was the guy I brought on. His name, if you don't know him, Mitch Levy. Mitch Levy, one of the most famed morning hosts in Seattle sports radio history. So glad to have you back, Mitch. How you doing?
I'm really good. I've got to get some things straight first. As you know, I always need to understand some things. So I know I was you can never take away from me that I was the first ever guest on HB Mornings. I hope that you'll remind the new defensive tackle of the Seahawks, who was your special guest, that he will always go down in history as a guest, just a guest on HB Mornings, but not the first ever guest. So now what I'd like to know is how many, like they do on the Johnny Carson show and they used to do on David Letterman, how many times in Saturday Night Live hosts we have jackets, those of us that have been here multiple times. How many guests have been here multiple times, Brian?
You know, that's a great question, and I haven't thought about how to honor multiple time guests.
I'll figure out how to. I'll do the honoring part.
I will tell you
how many people have been on it multiple times.
How many people have been on multiple times? We've got Rob Staten that's been on multiple times. We've got Griffin Sturgeon. We've got Brady Henderson, a guy you know well.
Wait a second, you've had Brady on twice since you've had me on once. Oh,
you know, Mitch, you gotta bring some insider information. Some
he says I don't have insider information. I live at the VMAC. I actually have a little cot underneath the bench press over there at the VMAC.
That's disturbing on a number of levels, but no, man, this is great. It's been a whirlwind through the draft, and really, really happy to have you back on. And I'm happy to have you on partially. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I do want to say, for all kidding aside, you have done an incredible job with this thing. I mean, you've done incredible. I mean, I thought it would be good. You know, I thought it would be maybe even better than good. But what you have accomplished in the first however many weeks, what is it, about 6 weeks? I don't know.
It's like this is episode 40, I want to say.
Okay.
So
you have done
every day.
A hell of a job. I'm a big fan. It says it on my can you see it underneath my name? Mitch Unfiltered. What does it say? What does it say?
It says love HB Mornings.
That's right. And I do. So good job.
I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you. And I really appreciate it. It's been fun, and I'll keep doing it as long as it's fun and people are enjoying it. And we've had, I should give a shout to the folks that are making it possible. We've got a bunch of YouTube members that have joined. Mitch, we are now, well, I'll give you the very latest up to date, because I know you've been dying. You've been bugging me about this. When's it going to happen? We're at 9,973 subscribers on the YouTube channel.
Wow.
So we're 27 away from hitting that 10K mark. So that's been great.
Let's do it on this show. Can we do it on this show?
I kind of expect, this is what I'm expecting from you. If you can push us over the 10K mark, then maybe we can have you back more often.
Okay.
So
okay.
These are the kind of deliveries we need.
My robe that I get for being a multiple time guest, I should get a little patch on. If I get you over 10,000, I not only want the robe for being a multiple guest, but I want the little patch on this.
Okay. I'll see what I can do about that. I'll see what I can do.
That's good.
So yeah, I do want to thank YouTube members, and I do want to thank Patreon members, patreon.com/hawkblogger, and folks that have been supporting the show. So we've grown a lot this month, people liking the extra content, and it's been fun. So let's keep it rolling. I can only imagine that there was Not everybody loves Hawk Blogger Mornings, especially the folks that probably weren't thrilled that the first round pick had his interview here before he did a press conference at the VMAC. But that's a story for another day.
Ruffled some feathers, did you now?
I'm sure I did. I didn't hear anything, but I'm guessing that wasn't a happy moment. Speaking of not happy moments, Mitch, did you see what happened yesterday with our starting quarterback on Twitter? Did you see what happened?
I saw a little of it, and you explained it to me before we went on, so I get it. I've seen similar things with him and just random Seahawks fans before. He's been known to jump into the fray on Twitter, has he not, over the years?
Yeah, but generally he comes out as the wise sage kind of, I don't know that he's combative as much. Maybe I'm misremembering, but a lot of times he comes out with, you guys are wrong, that kind of thing, or we're fine here or whatever. He kind of, a lot of times he douses the flames as opposed to fans them. Yesterday, for people that don't know, some guy, I honestly don't think he's anybody of interest. His name's John Frisella, at NFL Frisella, FRASCELLA. He writes a tweet yesterday, and this was at 5:25 a.m. Pacific time. And he says breaking, which is it's bad. It's not real news as soon as anyone starts a tweet with breaking. He says Seattle Seahawks starting quarterback Geno Smith is on quote on shakier ground than people realize, end quote, according to West Coast source. The Seahawks front office believes they, quote, got a steal, unquote, in the Sam Howell trade, and they are astonished at how productive he was despite a dysfunctional situation in Washington. My source compared the Seattle situation to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Quote, if Russ falters, Fields is going to be there, he said. Now, Geno saw this tweet. He quote tweeted it, and he said, you just made this BS up. Media is full of liars. It's so crazy. He went on to say, I'm calling y'all out from now on. You all lied all offseason. Now, Mitch, I got to say, first, let me get your reaction. What is your reaction when you hear about that?
Yeah, well, the first thing when you read that to me that I say is, outside of the thin ice comment at the top of the tweet that you said, I don't understand why that tweet should be antagonistic to anybody. I could have written, Joe Schmo from Tequila could have written that tweet. You don't have to have any info. What kind of inside information do you have to say that the Seahawks were thrilled to get Sam Howell, thought he played a lot better than maybe other people thought under the circumstances? I mean, what really is that tweet say? That he's there if Geno Smith doesn't do well as the starting quarterback? I mean, isn't this a normal situation of a football team, of an NFL football team with two quarterbacks like Sam Howell and Geno Smith? I don't see where that tweet in and of itself should antagonize Geno Smith, except for maybe the thin ice comment. The thin ice comment suggests that, oh my God, the leash is not long. He's not going to be given too many chances to make mistakes. If he makes mistakes early, they're gonna flip the switch really early to Sam Howell. That I could understand drawing some sort of a reaction from Geno, but the rest of it is, am I wrong? The rest of it is nothing, really. Do I believe that the Seahawks are happy to have Sam Howell? Sure. Do I believe even that maybe the Seahawks think that they got a steal in getting Sam Howell? Fine. Sure. Do I think Sam Howell is better than maybe advertised? I don't know. I'll give you an I don't know on that. I don't know that I watched him enough last year to derive an opinion about whether he's better than everybody thinks he is. I happen to know that you and I are on the same page, I think, on Geno, and have been for years now, because we talk about it on our show, Mitch Unfiltered, all the time. Shameless plug. I don't understand why so much hate on the part of 12s for Geno Smith. I just have not gotten that for the last couple of years. I don't understand it. I thought he has played better than I ever expected him to play when they gave him the starting quarterback job way back when. And I still believe that under the right set of circumstances, offensive line, weapons, good scheme, I think that Geno Smith can guide them into the playoffs and perhaps deep into the playoffs. I think you'll agree on all that, won't you?
I do agree on all that. And I don't think I'll go a little further. I don't think that Geno Smith even pays any attention to that tweet if the Seahawks front office and coaching staff had not handled the offseason the way that they did. At every turn, talking about Drew Lock before they talk about Geno Smith. At every turn, giving reason to have question about whether Geno Smith is secure in his job.
Right.
And then when they do say that he's a starter, it seems very forced and it feels very reactive. It doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of sincerity. And then yesterday, Mike Macdonald was on an interview on NFL Network, and he comes on and says something along the lines of, Geno is the tip of the spear for us. He is, he's been helping us. He's loved the way he's reacted this offseason. Everyone goes, hey, see, I told you that he's fine. I heard that from Mike Macdonald. I heard the interview. It was like, what was he going to say? It was nothing. It was not, this was not him coming out and saying, we are so lucky to have Geno. This is the best player we could possibly have. It was like, yeah, Geno's our starter and he's the guy that's going to be in a leadership position. I don't think that means anything. I don't think that they've created an environment where Geno Smith can feel. Here's what I'll tell you what I really think happened, Mitch. I think that they created this deterioration of support for Geno through their words in the media. I think Geno and or his agent back-channeled and said, what the hell? Like, what's going on? And it probably happened more than once because they made this mistake more than once. They made it more than twice, more than 3 times, to where then they said, okay, well, we got to change our media message. And I think they reacted in the front office and changed their message. So Geno knows that they didn't just start saying positive things about him because they feel that way. They started saying positive things about him because his agent or him went back channel and said, hey, cut it out.
Okay, well, let me jump in there. Because if what you say is true and you have a really good finger on the pulse of what's going on, I think as well as anybody in the community that maybe you're not over there every day, but you have a good sense, better than probably I do at this stage of where I am. If what you say is true, then one of the following 2 things is also true. Number 1 is that Geno will perform better with a little fire under his ass. Okay? That's A. Or B. And it can only be one of these 2 things. Or B, John Schneider and Mike Macdonald are idiots. One of the 2 things. Because you just don't handle this. If you're trying to put your team in the best situation to be successful, then why are you undercutting your quarterback? Why are you undercutting your starting quarterback? You want Geno to go out there and play his best ball in September of 2024, do you not? You want Geno to be at his best, in his best spot. So either they've determined that the best way to get the best out of Geno is to do this, to maybe make him feel like the ground is not so secure beneath him. We're going to get a better Geno because we know Geno personally, and he will excel in that situation better if he thinks that, he's the guy and there's no concern. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder. I don't know that about Geno. Probably you don't know about that about Geno, but if that's the case, great for the Seahawks. If they're going to get the best Geno because this is the way they're handling. If that's not the case, then what are they doing, Brian? What exactly are they doing by undercutting the guy in every media session? It doesn't make any kind of sense. It's stupid. It's stupid. They could feel, as I said, if it's not A, and A being, hey, they feel like, oh, we'll get the best Geno if we do it this way, which I don't know. I don't think it is that way. But if it's not A, then why are they not just internalizing how they feel about Sam Howell, about Geno, not saying anything? In fact, when they're asked in the media, say the opposite, which is Geno is our quarterback. He's our starting quarterback. We believe in him. We think we can go places with him. And internally saying, hey, we've got Sam Howell. We like him very much. We're going to go to him if we need to go to him, if we think that Geno Smith is not going to, if Geno Smith doesn't perform the way we want him. They can internalize it. They don't have to make that a public thing. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Here's the most innocent interpretation. And then I want to widen out here from this lens in a second to with Geno's situation in general, which I find as a human condition very confusing.
Confusing to me too.
But the most innocent interpretation is that John Schneider and the and the coaching staff really wanted Drew Lock back, and it wasn't because it wasn't anti-Geno. They weren't trying to undercut Geno, but they wanted to get the message out that Drew Lock was someone that they really believed in. They wanted him here. And so their focus was just, okay, we're going to talk about Drew. It wasn't intentional to kind of undercut Geno. And they're a little bit new at being the
I don't buy
new coaches
Brian,
in front office.
Brian, I don't buy it. This is the most tight-lipped John Schneider, send out smoke screens, playing with the media, using the media in the draft situation to say that these guys are wet behind the ears, so maybe they made a few public mistakes. I don't buy. In fact, I think that's way too naive. I refuse to buy that. John Schneider knows exactly how to play the media and knows exactly what he's saying and the impact of what he's saying. And I can't accept the notion that they've made a mistake in how they've approached this publicly, that all of a sudden he's not media savvy because Pete Carroll has gone away and Mike Macdonald has come in.
Well, so that gets me back to the kind of the larger question, which is why, if you think about the Seahawks fan base, you think about Seattle in general as a sports fan base and as just a place in this country.
I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
What is it defined as? It is defined as, what Matt Hasselbeck used to call Southern Alaska, the forgotten part of the country, underrated, overlooked, East Coast bias, just a forgotten part of the country, and underdogs. We love our underdogs in Seattle. We love that everybody counts us out, and we find a way to shove it in their faces. Right?
Should love Geno, right? He fits everything that you just said. What's going on?
So hard. Every time you say something positive about Geno, a significant portion of the fan base is like, yeah, but look at his record as a starter, or, yeah, but look what he did here, or he's just mediocre. And Mitch, this is, I have tried as a Seahawks fan for a long time. I don't try to fool myself. It does me no good, because if I'm going to go and tell myself the team's really good or a player's really good at a really important position like quarterback, I'm just setting myself up to be frustrated and angry.
Right.
People have to prove themselves to be worth me having confidence in them and saying, yeah, I want this guy in the most important position on the field. And doesn't matter just what I think, but I guess my point is I have a high bar, and I think he's very much cleared that bar as being a guy that I want to be the starting quarterback of the Seahawks. I've got some numbers to share with you. I've got some other pieces, but I just want to, am I crazy? Do you get that as well?
But you're kind of, unfortunately, this is not going to make for good HB mornings, because you're really preaching to the choir. I happen to not agree with you on a lot of different things, and I think that's what makes our thing on Unfiltered the Seahawks no table with Brady Henderson and Brian Nemhauser. I think it makes it a spirited conversation because often we don't all agree. Well, Brady doesn't really have an opinion, but you and I often don't agree. In this case, I don't have answers for you. I just don't have. I
get this response though from other
all
people.
the time. People get mad at me.
What I'm experiencing.
Yes, when I make a comment during a game about him or during the week about his performances or his future, God, as soon as I say anything positive about Geno Smith on Twitter or on the show, I could take into my email whenever we do segments on Mitch Unfiltered where we talk about Geno Smith and I'm positive towards Geno Smith. I start getting the emails from MitchUnfiltered.com. I mean, it's crazy, and I can't really explain it. I am with you. I think he's been more than we could have expected. I think he has shown both flashes in throws and in moments of games, top-level quarterbacking. I think he's shown that. And more than that, somebody would say, okay, Mitch, you got to do more than just show me flashes within games. Every quarterback in the NFL is going to show you flashes to within games. But the naysayer might say, what he's got to do more than what a quarterback's got to do more than show you flashes in games is he's got to do it over a larger sample set. He's got to do it over a stretch of time. And for the first 8 weeks of the previous season, not last year, the previous season, whatever you want to call it, 2022, 2023, was he not the MVP of the league halfway through the league? When they went to Germany to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I believe that was game 8 or game 9. You can check me on that.
Yeah.
Were there not independent sources like ESPN.com and like SI? Were there not places that were giving you the midseason MVP of the league and either making him the midseason MVP or one of the top 2 or 3 candidates? Did he not do it over an 8-week, 9-week stretch where he was probably the best quarterback in the league over those 8 or 9 games? I believe he was. So I've seen enough to feel like that when you put the proper pieces around him, that is he one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league? No. Is he one of the top 7 quarterbacks in the league? Maybe not. Maybe numerically you would tell me yes, but I think he's plenty good enough to guide them where they want to go if you put the proper pieces around him.
I'm enjoying watching the chat because it is so indicative of this
I'm
conversation.
not seeing that.
Even just you and I talking about this is angering people. They're like, of course, what's wrong? Don't you want a better quarterback in Seattle? Of course of course Geno's not the guy. Of course, and Mitch, I'm looking over here to my left. You can't see this, but I'm looking on my wall and I've got a framed front page of the Seattle Times and the Seattle Post-Intelligencer from 2006, January 24th, I think, 25th, 2006.
Right.
It says Super Bowl ! And on the front page is Matt Hasselbeck, number 8, holding the NFC championship trophy over his head. First time the Seahawks have ever made a Super Bowl.
Okay.
You tell me where Matt Hasselbeck ranked among the NFL quarterbacks in his era. Was he a top 5 quarterback at that time?
10. Right off the cuff, I'll say 10th, 11th, 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. I may be wrong about that.
I think wherever he was from a physical standpoint, from a numbers standpoint, from a recognition standpoint, from a putting the team on his shoulders standpoint. There weren't a lot of examples to say. This is arguably my favorite Seahawk of all time. I love Matt Hasselbeck. I can also admit he was not one of the best, and that team should have won a Super Bowl. And that team was not a super team like the 2013 Seahawks, where he was surrounded by every possible Hall of Fame talent. He had 2 Hall of Famers on the left side of his line.
Right.
And then, Sean Alexander won the MVP, but I don't know that anyone thinks he's a Hall of Fame necessarily player. And that's it. Like, there were some good players on that team for sure, but that was not a massively over-talented team. So I guess my point is, if you're asking me, do I think the Seahawks can win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith? I absolutely do. I absolutely do. And I think that other teams could win a Super Bowl. If you put Geno Smith on that 49ers team, I think they would have had every bit the chance, maybe a better chance of winning the Super Bowl last year. I don't know if anyone's beaten Patrick Mahomes anytime soon, but point being, there's so much vitriol about him being the guy. And I'm like, you look at Jets fans, and they're like, they're embracing a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers who's coming off an Achilles. Geno hasn't been injured, knock on wood. No. Geno's 33. And people are acting like if we don't get a new quarterback, we're doomed. Like, I find it really bizarre. And I think he is a great guy to cheer from as a story. Like, his story is one of the best stories going in sports. I find him a great guy to cheer for as a person. This guy was gifted. He's an artist, smart, well-spoken, great representative of our state, our city, all that kind of stuff. And then we can talk about, we'll do this in a second, some of the numbers and like the accomplishments he's had. And honestly, like, it bothers me. It really does that there's this much opposition. Like, why is there so much need to move on from him? Where does that come from?
It's not going away anytime soon, because the only way it's going to go away is if they as a team go deep into the playoffs with Geno Smith.
Yeah.
That's going to be the only way. And even then, it might not completely go away. Somebody will say, oh, well, they didn't win the world championship because Geno Smith is their quarterback. But the only way that it's going to die down, let's say die down, is if the Seahawks go deep into the playoffs. And I think you and I can also agree on they're just not talented enough. They're just not ready to make a deep run. So this season is destined to end what? 7-10, 8-9, 9-8, somewhere in there. They'll be in that quicksand. We'll be having Mr. Playoffs on Mitch Unfiltered, trying to figure out how do we get him in as the last wild card with 3 weeks to go. We'll be having that conversation, and it's going to end very similarly to the way the last several seasons have ended. And when that happens, you just know it will just refuel the anti-Geno Smith. It will all be because Geno Smith's not good enough, instead of it being because maybe the defense isn't good enough, or maybe the linebackers aren't good enough, or maybe the offensive line isn't good enough, or maybe the safeties aren't good enough. It'll never be that. It'll be because of the quarterback. So I got bad news for you, Nemhauser. What is frustrating you right now amongst Seahawks fans it's not dying down anytime soon.
Well, and I hear you, Mitch. I think you're right. And
will they embrace Sam Howell? By the way, will those same people embrace Sam Howell if they make a change, or if Geno gets hurt? Let's say Geno gets hurt in the third regular season game, and he has to miss a few games. And let's say Sam Howell comes in and plays mediocre football. What are we going to get from the 12s? Are we going to get, he should be the quarterback for the remainder of the season, he's much better than Geno, or are they going to be hard on Sam Howell as well? How's that going to work?
I think people will embrace Sam Howell. One of the things that Sam Howell has going for him is that he's 23. And so, you get a young quarterback, and you get someone, if he comes in and he plays well at that age, at his contract price, then yeah, of course people are going to rally around him. And I think rightfully so. I like Sam Howell. I've been vocally positive about that trade. I thought it was a very savvy move from John Schneider, especially the way the draft played out. I think he got the best possible young quarterback he could this offseason. So I think that's great. Part of what bothers me just on a human level is that people are going to feel vindicated if Geno fails. Like, people are like looking, they're like, see, he's just not good enough.
Yeah, there's no question.
And I don't understand why this area wouldn't be like, oh my God, I want him to prove everybody wrong. Matt Hasselbeck was benched. He was behind Trent Dilfer. He and Mike Holmgren, like, you talk to coach, like, they battled, and Hasselbeck had to come from, he was the Phoenix rising from the flames, right? And so people love that. And Geno, for whatever reason, there's not everybody. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but there is a large portion. It's not 10%, it's not 20%, it's not 50%, but it's a large percentage of the Seahawks fan base that does not embrace Geno as the starter. And they're just waiting for him to fall. And it's the wrong guy to feel that way about, as far as I'm concerned.
I don't think your pleading is going to have any kind of impact, though.
Well, clearly not. I mean, it's just making people more mad.
Go the other way. Yeah.
It's probably going to just make more people mad. I'm going to share a couple numbers with you, Mitch.
Okay, I'm ready.
And you tell me if any of these do anything for you.
I'm not a huge, I'm a little bit of a numbers guy, but not, I don't think as big of a numbers guy as PFF, your BFF is.
So you can sit back and listen, see if any of these. This is looking at the last half of last season, okay? And one of the reasons I picked the last half of last season is the Seahawks over this stretch from week 10 on, they faced the Commanders, who are no great shakes, but then they faced the Rams in LA. This is the death row of their schedule, okay? Yep. Rams in LA. Then they came back and played the 49ers. Then they went on the road to play the Cowboys, and they came back, and then they went on the road to play the 49ers. Then they came back home and played the Eagles. This was a very challenging stretch of their schedule.
We called it the gauntlet. We were waiting for it all year long, were we not?
Absolutely.
We were talking about how they had to build up wins and get a decent record before the gauntlet hit. This was the gauntlet. You're talking about the gauntlet. Okay.
It was the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Over that period of time, I'm going to give you a few different numbers.
I'm ready.
So we'll start with the BFF, PFF, because I know you love it.
Yeah.
The top quarterbacks for that period of time from a pass grade. Number 1, Brock Purdy. Number 2, Justin Herbert. Number 3, Jordan Love. Number 4, Dak Prescott. Number 5, Geno Smith.
Okay.
All right. Number 5 in the NFL for not like one game or two games, the last half of the season, the toughest stretch. All right. Now let's look at passer rating for that period of time. He was number 10 in the NFL with a 98.0 passer rating during that time.
Okay.
He did all this, but I'll give you a couple more. This is a more obscure number, but advanced stats guys know this. EPA per play, expected points added per play. Over that period of time, Geno Smith ranked sixth in the NFL in EPA per play. And he did all this, Mitch, behind the worst offensive line in the NFL or close to it. Geno Smith had the 26th time to throw in the NFL in terms of amount of time before a pressure was applied to the quarterback. 26th. And if you looked at other numbers, this was absolutely the worst offensive line in terms of giving up pressure. So that's just the back half of last year. If you look at the whole year, Geno Smith also, what's another way that you judge quarterbacks? How do they play when the game's on the line?
Sure.
Geno Smith led the entire NFL in game-winning drives, comebacks, fourth quarter comebacks over the last 2 years, the most game-winning drives. He set a record for the most game-winning drives in that period of time. I mean, of some of the great quarterbacks during this period of time. And he also, as far as like what's another way you judge a quarterback is, can they make throws that another quarterback couldn't make?
That's the flashes I'm talking about. Yes.
Right. In the parlance of PFF, these are called big time throws. They're in tight windows. They're throws that are not likely to be completed by most quarterbacks. Geno Smith last year, which was not a great year for Geno. I'm not saying he was like a fantastic quarterback last year. This was in like an average year for him, I would say, behind a terrible offensive line. He had the 7th most big time throws in the NFL, just behind Matthew Stafford. He had 32. Matthew Stafford had 33. The most in the NFL was Dak Prescott at 38. So I'm not saying that means Geno Smith is God's gift. He's the best quarterback on the face of the earth. I just find it very frustrating and a little confusing that in spite of a lot of these numbers, in spite of a lot of what our eye tells us, in spite of what a lot of the film shows, people just cannot wait for this guy to fall and for the next guy to step in. And I just had to vent about that a little bit with you because I know you feel the same way.
I do.
And
I do.
I was just
I don't feel like, Brian, do you feel like he had a better year last year or the year before?
well, so that's the funny thing. I would say the year before. The
But
year before,
the last 6 or 7 games the year before were not good.
they were not. He had John Schneider even talked about it. He's like, hey, the first half of his first year was great. The second half of his second year was great. And he needs to put together a complete season.
Yeah. And he does make mistakes. And I think what maybe the naysayers see that really irritates them is that he does make 2 or 3 mistakes a game. We've talked about this on the note table on Unfiltered with you a lot. He could play a really, really good football game that they lose, where for, let's say, the 35 plays that he's called upon to make a play and not hand off. Let's say there's 35 plays in a given game where he's called to make a play and not hand the ball off. He could make 32 or 30 out of 32 really good plays, but he could also make 3 plays in that same game where he throws the ball away or he holds on to it too long before the end of the half and gets sacked and doesn't throw the ball away, or he tries to fit the ball into double or triple coverage and it gets intercepted when all they really needed was 3 points at the time. And he gives, there are those types of Geno Smith plays that I think fuel the naysayers. Don't you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I think the opposite of big time throws where you're making a great throw is turnover worthy plays. And they track that as well. Turnover worthy plays.
Turnover worthy plays. Okay.
And in 2022, his first year starting the full year, which I think both agree is probably his better year, he was, among qualifying quarterbacks, 33rd in the NFL in turnover. 4.2% of his throws were considered turnover worthy. I think it would be surprising to most. It was surprising to me that last year, it dropped. It was actually 3.6, but he's still ranked 29th in the NFL. He's down there with Tua Tagovailoa from, from Miami, and Baker Mayfield and Trevor Lawrence. Those are guys that are down there.
But I don't know what turnover-worthy plays are. I'm talking about, and this is hard because we're doing this in May, and you're asking an old man like me to remember plays. But it seems like there are a lot of plays. It seems like it went up last year, the types of plays like end of half, you don't have a timeout. I'm just creating something here. End of half, you don't have a timeout left. You're at like the 30 or the 32-yard line or the 27-yard line of the opponent's 27. You don't have a out left, and you get sacked. You try to extend the play. You run around a little bit. Instead of throwing the ball out of bounds and stopping the clock, you get sacked. Is that a turnover? Does that count as a turnover-ready play in your stat? Probably not. But therein lies a frustration, I think, of Seahawks fans where there were moments in the red zone where he would make a mental mistake that would cost the team. Yeah. And I think that's got to be cleaned up this year.
The idea that being a supporter of Geno Smith as the starter means that you're blind to his flaws is just flat wrong, right? I mean, you just described a good example of that. He gets overconfident in his arm and he tries to fit it into spots he shouldn't, which sometimes is why he makes these throws that are like, oh my God. And you kind of have to have that mentality as a gunslinger in the NFL. Brett Favre, people forget. People remember him as the best quarterback ever. That guy threw so many interceptions. But he always had the courage to put the ball. But there's times where you're like, Geno, what are you doing?
Right.
He doesn't take the easy drop off sometimes to running backs. When he was playing his best, he was very good at reading, seeing the play wasn't open, getting rid of it, avoiding sacks, keeping the ball moving, kind of like the way I thought Michael Penix played for Washington, where he just would always make sure there was positive plays. He got away from that at times last year. There's a lot of things that I think Geno does not do excellent. He's not elite at, for sure.
Right.
I just like the common things I hear, Mitch, are, well, he's getting old. We got to find our next guy. He's 33. Like, I'm not saying I wouldn't, like, I would love Sam Howell to turn out to be Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes and be the next great young quarterback, and that'd be awesome. I'd love us to draft the next great guy. Like, I'm all for that. But I don't feel this urgency that, like, the Seahawks, if they don't get a young quarterback tomorrow, that they're screwed. I don't see any evidence of why Geno Smith's play should drop off. So that's one thing I hear. Then I hear, well, he doesn't play well in the big games. Well, I just went through the toughest stretch in the Seahawks schedule, and he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, while other teams were playing easier schedules and weren't putting up the same numbers. Can he make big throws? Yes, he can. Is he smart? Yes, he is. I'm really curious. This is going to be a year. I think we can kind of close on this because I want to talk to you about some other things.
Yeah.
This is another make or break year for him. And he's going to have Ryan Grubb. He's going to have Scott Huff, a different offensive line coach, probably a different way that they block. I don't know how much they helped him in the offseason on that offensive line. But I do think Ryan Grubb is a significantly better play caller and a better fit for what Geno does than what they had here in Shane Waldron. And I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to have his second year. We're not going to see as many bubble screens to that guy. I think there's some reasons to think this could be the year. And I just am curious to see how many people will, even if he plays really well and the team wins 10 games, because they're not, to your point, maybe they're not a Super Bowl contender at this point. Are people going to still just be like, well, yeah, but we got to move on. He's not the guy. I'm braced for that he could still play really well this year and people are still clamoring for the next guy. So that's kind of my soapbox. And I know you generally agree with that.
I do. I'm a little more worried about this year than you seem to be, but you're the shining light.
What are you worried about?
Well, I just, you just said all the reasons. You talked about some of the coaches, the new offensive line coach, the new offensive coordinator. And it's one of these things where you can tilt your head one way and see it one way, or you can tilt your head the other way. I tend to be a passionate pessimist. And so I tend to look at the receivers. DK Metcalf, is he going to be better this year than last year? Tyler Lockett, is he going to be better this year than last year, or is he on a decline? Who's the fourth receiver? What if one of those receivers gets hurt? And then the offensive line. I just don't think they did enough. And they never do enough. I mean, I'll go to my grave. Here lies Mitch Levy, who will always disagree with the effort that John Schneider made on the offensive line. There are so many question marks along that offensive line that in my world, they've got to get really lucky and get a lot of good answers for that offensive line to be better. I don't care who the coach is. Charles, you can go right, left. You can go left to right. Charles Cross has not shown me at all that he is worthy. If you redrafted that draft, I know some people like to go back and redraft drafts. Where would Charles Cross be in that draft? Third round, maybe? Fourth round? The left guard is Tomlinson, I think, at this particular moment. Mm-hmm. The guy is 32 years old and nobody wanted him. Nobody else wanted him. So what does that tell you? The center is Olu Oluwatimi at this moment, or Nick Harris, I think they've got back at the University of Washington. Mm-hmm. I'd love Olu Oluwatimi to be great, but there's no reason to believe he will be. He couldn't win the job last year when we kind of wanted him to, when they brought in a journeyman from Detroit to try to compete with him. Who knows? There's a massive question mark above the center's head. The right guard is Anthony Bradford. I think at this moment, if it's not Christian Haynes, the new third-round draft choice, yeah, Anthony Bradford. Would you call Anthony Bradford? Go to your BFF, PFF. He was probably serviceable at right guard in his starts last year, but really the only reason he started was why? Why did he start at right guard? Injuries. And then the right tackle, who I think could be the best of them all, has a significant knee injury. We're wondering whether it's degenerative. We're wondering if he'll ever be the same again. We're wondering whether he ever can get through 16 games. And you've got George Fant as an insurance policy. Okay, that's a passionate pessimist's look at your offensive line right now. Your look at the offense. This is where you and I completely differ. You look at that offensive line and say, well, they got a new offensive line coach. Cross is one more year into the league. This guy from UConn looks really good, looks the part. Oluwatimi's second year. He's going to blossom this year. The question's, I mean, two people can look at the same group of five men and have completely different outlooks. And I tend to look at the glass half empty. So that's the way I look at it.
I think that's, I don't think you and I are that far off there. I know it's better listening if we are, but I don't think we're that far off. I think there are some reasons to be more hopeful. If I'll say this, Mitch, if it was the same group of guys that they had last year and the same group of coaches, I would be exactly where you are.
Okay.
So I guess I'm pointing out where I think there's some reasons that things could be better. I think it was the worst injury situation you could hope for in the offensive line last year, or like not hope for. And so I think there's regression to the mean there of like things should get a little bit hopefully back to normal. And then there's some players that you hope. I think Christian Haynes is going to be an upgrade. How much of an upgrade, I don't know. But to your point, there is not a great player as of now, not a single great player. There's not even a single solidly good player on that offensive line. I think Abe Lucas would qualify as that if he's healthy. But to your point,
how quickly can you right now while we're on look up your BFF PFF? Because I have a question.
Oh, I got it because you mentioned Anthony Bradford.
No, I want to ask you about a different guy now. I'm on a different guy because you just made a comment.
Okay.
You just made a comment that I'm going to challenge a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
What was Phil Haynes's grades on BFF PFF
last year?
Last year. What kind of
he got a 52 overall grade, which ranks 65th among guards.
Among starting guards.
Among among guards with a certain amount of snaps.
There's only 64 by my calculation starting guards.
Well, so it depends on how many
starting guard in the league. Okay,
you gotta look by snaps because there's players that are injured and that.
I don't know. So, I don't remember thinking that he was horrible, and I don't remember thinking that he was any good. I remember being indifferent about Phil Haynes. So when you say that Christian Haynes is going to come in and be better than Phil, okay, I think there's a shot of that. I think there's also a shot that he comes in and he's not as good as Anthony Bradford. And Anthony Bradford he can't even beat Anthony Bradford out for the starting job. I think there's
so Anthony Bradford played more snaps than Phil Haynes last year, and he had a 51.7 overall grade, which ranked 67th. So Haynes was 65, Bradford was 67.
God.
And if you go to pass blocking, Mitch,
and these people, by the way, want Geno Smith to be a freaking MVP with two right guards that are 65th and 67th in the league in guards, right?
Well, let's talk pass protection for 1 second. Anthony Bradford, who's the guy that basically they were going to hand a job to coming into this season, he had a 38.9 grade for pass blocking, which ranks 78th out of 88 guards in the NFL.
Shameful. So,
I mean, they're rough.
When can we start? I know he's your buddy. You love yourself some John Schneider, but at what point can we throw him up against the wall and grab him by the lapel and say, you are going to address the offensive line in a serious way? None of this 6th and 7th round, secondary free agent market. No, you're going to go, if you want to still be the GM of this team, you're going to go get some blue chip free agents, spend some significant dollars and resources, not just Charles Cross. you're going to go and address the offensive line, or you're out. You're out. Get on your big boat at Newport Shores and get out. You get out if you don't address the offensive line. How many years are all of us? Now, we can disagree on Geno Smith. You've got all your listeners listening right now riled up because they hate Geno Smith, right? And they hate the fact that you like Geno Smith. So let's talk about one thing. Let's talk about two things that we can all agree on. All of us here that disagree about Geno Smith. We all can agree on, A, the Mariners' offense sucks, and B, how many straight years are we going to complain and bitch and moan about the Seahawks offensive line? I think we can all agree on those two items.
I think you're right.
Okay.
I think you're right. I agree. And I think the offensive line,
every year,
you're not going to get an argument from me, because you know that my number one priority in the offseason free agency was go get a veteran guard. They didn't spend
Why?
on it. They went, not even second tier. They went fourth tier.
Why?
And then in the draft, I do think that they put significant capital into the offensive line, but when you don't have a second round pick, you're essentially, to your point, you're talking about, you got one day 2 pick and then a bunch of day 3 picks, and you have to hope. You got to hope this works out. And John Schneider, this is a philosophical thing with him. He does believe that interior offensive line is overrated, overpaid, overdrafted.
All right. Well, fine. How many years does he have to see his offensive line suck so much, his interior offensive line sucks so much, and cripple his team to the layer where they can't get where they want to go before he rethinks that philosophy?
You have as good a guess as I do.
You remember Maxwell Smart?
Of course.
Do you remember Get Smart? Does anybody in your audience? Do you have to be 90
oldies like us?
Okay, Get Smart, Maxwell Smart. There was a famous scene. John Schneider reminds me of a famous scene from Get Smart, where Maxwell Smart was interviewing to go to Chaos, his main rival. He was posing as somebody who wanted to get into Chaos. So he went to school. He went to class. He went to Chaos class. And there was a big goon standing in the front of the class. And Siegfried, who was Bernie Capel from The Doctor and the Love Boat days, Bernie Capel says, "Mr. Smart, come up to the front of the class." And he comes up. "I want you to hit this guy in the middle of the stomach." And Don Adams, Maxwell Smart, rears back, and he slams the goon in the middle of the stomach. And the goon picks Maxwell Smart up and throws him clear over the desk, breaks the desk. He gets up in his suit and he says, "Can I try that again, please?" "Yes, Mr. Smart." And Maxwell Smart goes over to the goon, hits him in the stomach with a right hand. The goon picks him up and throws him over the desk, smashing into the desk, behind the desk, disappearing again. And Maxwell Smart comes from the rebel and says, "Can I try it one more time, please?" And Siegfried says, "Sure, Mr. Smart." And he hits the son of a bitch right in the stomach. The guy picks him up and throws him for a third time over the desk, right? And Smart gets up and says, "I think I've proved my point, Siegfried." "What is that point, Mr. Smart?" And he said, "The fool fell for the same trick 3 times in a row," was his answer. John Schneider is Maxwell Smart when it comes to the offensive line. How many times did John Schneider have to be picked up by the goon and thrown across the room, over the desk, crashing into the desk and on the floor, before he gets up and realizes this thing's not going my way on the offensive line? My philosophy doesn't work on the offensive line. That's my question.
Mitch, if I went through and I told you all of the players that John Schneider has drafted to be offensive linemen, and I told you all the players that he had signed as free agents to be offensive linemen,
yeah,
it would be very depressing. I mean, it's not just It's not just recently. It's not. I mean,
is it because he can't scout offensive linemen? His team over there can't scout offensive linemen, or is this a lack of resources spent? Like, you'd have to share with me John Schneider's vision and how he's acquired these guys versus how, let's say, another city or another team that has good offensive lines over year after year, how they what resources they spend on their offensive line. How do you do?
I mean, I could do
know.
this real time, but I don't want to be too boring.
Okay.
I mean, what comes to mind is
another show.
Is like, if you looked at the Detroit Lions, if you looked at even a good example of this would be the Rams. You don't have to go farther than the division.
Okay.
The Rams last year spent a early second round pick on Steve Avila.
Yeah.
Played guard last year.
Yep.
Big dude, played reasonably well.
Yeah.
And he's moved to center now. So they've got one of the strongest centers now. Then they traded for Kevin Dotson to be a guard. They turned him into, in a year, from a mediocre guard to one of the top free agent guards. They re-signed him to a big deal. Then they went out and they spent top of the market free agent money on Jonah Jackson from the Lions, a young guard.
The guy that you wanted here.
He's number one on my list for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
And who's their last guy? They got a right tackle. Hold on one sec. I got to pull this up because it's going to bother me. They got a Larrick Jackson at left tackle, who's no great shakes, but their right tackle, Rob Havenstein. So, I don't remember exactly how they acquired. Was he drafted by the Rams? He was drafted in the second round. So another second round pick. Let me just double check who drafted him. But that's a guy that, yes, he was drafted by the Rams. That was a long time ago, though. So I see that as a team that invested significant capital in the line, and in 2 seasons essentially went from it being a weakness to it being a strength. And I thought the Seahawks entered this offseason with a chance. Look, I liked what they did when they draft Charles Cross and Abe Lucas in rounds 1 and 3. And even if Charles Cross, I agree with you, he's not the greatest. Not a huge fan of Charles Cross. I think he has more upside. He is the best of the tackles that were drafted in the top 10 of that draft. The other tackles absolutely flopped. So the Seahawks somewhat lucked in because they had the last pick of those guys. They lucked into the best one of those guys, at least. But he and Abe Lucas both have they're good bookends. I think they're not great, but I think they can be good. And then
they have bad luck with Abe Lucas.
With the injury, we'll have to see what happens with that. If he comes back and he's able to play, then I'm very happy with Abe Lucas at right tackle. I think he's as good as any right tackle we've probably had.
Me too.
But they had this chance this offseason to go out there and say, okay, we're going to get one proven guard that we know is good, and then we can go into the draft. And if we get a Christian Haynes, now we're in a beautiful position of adding him as another great, like, high-end starting guard, and he can compete with Anthony Bradford. Instead, Laken Tomlinson is the answer, and it's not going to get anyone particularly excited. So yeah, I agree. I think that they've gone bargain basement. They prioritized other positions, and
it's bitten them.
It absolutely has.
Been thrown over the desk over and over and over again, and he doesn't learn. He doesn't learn that it's not the right way to approach it. But
I just don't know if you say year after year you want to be a physical, tough team, how consistently you don't prioritize that part of even the line itself, why the interior is not a priority. And this is not just a recent thing. This goes back. I'll tell you one more story about this, Mitch, that drives me a little crazy. I thought the Seahawks actually were wise about, I want to say, like 8-9 years ago, when they said, you know what, we're seeing a change in college football. The offenses have changed so much that we can't get offensive linemen that come into the league really ready. We need to actually really teach them how to run block, teach them how to be in a air raid kind of spread offense, right?
Yes.
And I thought, that's a good observation. So what's the logical conclusion from that, Mitch? Veteran offensive linemen in the NFL, their value should increase. Because if you're knowing that there's going to be more and more projects in college,
yeah,
and at that point, interior offensive linemen were cheap. And this is when guys like Kelechi Osemele from the Ravens, I banged the table back then when he was a free agent. He can play tackle, but he's a great all-pro guard. Go get him. And what do? They go with, Patrick Lewis at center, and they go with these other guys that were just bargain basement interior linemen. And I think they made the right observation, but they made the wrong strategic adjustment to that observation. And so, yeah, I'm with you on it. I definitely am. Well, we're coming up on an hour. We are at an hour. Let me ask you this before I let you go.
Yeah.
I always have respected that you have a good, keen sense of reading people. And I think that's part of how you've always been good at interviewing folks.
Okay.
And so I'm curious, even in your early small sample size of exposure to one, John Schneider as now the Grand Poobah, do you notice any differences? Is there anything that you're noticing there? And two, Mike Macdonald, head coach. What are your early impressions of either them individually in their new roles and potentially them together as a team?
I'm not over there anymore. So it's really hard for me to answer that question. I think it's way too early to generate for me. The Brady Hendersons of the world who are over there every day and deal with these guys every day could answer that question a lot better than I can. I don't have a read because I've just not been exposed. I haven't watched Mike Macdonald on the sidelines. I do feel a little, this is just a really small thing. I'll give you a really, really small, tiny thing. There's a little buddy stuff going on over there between the two of them. You see that? There's a little like, hey, drinking pals, buddy type of thing going over. I don't know that I love that. You never got that because of the difference in age and generations between Pete Carroll and John Schneider. But this is a really little thing, and I may be way off base. And it may just be one of those things that drives Mitch Levy crazy. I don't know. The garage shirts and are they about the same age? Probably Schneider's probably much older, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, much older than Mike Macdonald. But they're kind of the same generation. There's a little bit of buddy dude. Hey, dude, there's a couple of dudes there sitting at the desk talking about draft choices. That's annoying me a little bit. That's just me being Seinfeld, I think. I just a little bit too buddy over there sitting at the chair.
It's funny. I see that, and for me, I'm fine with that. They need to be developing some kind of relationship. It feels a little forced still. It doesn't feel as natural as I would have hoped.
Are these guys going to Dino's every day after work?
I doubt
every day and having a drink every day? Are they going out, hanging out, having?
I don't think that's who Mike Macdonald is.
Did I see John Schneider in a cat? Did I see him in a walking boot yesterday, or was that not right?
Oh, I don't know.
I think I saw John Schneider in either a boot or a limp, or I think he hurt it. Did he hurt his foot or something? He was hobbling around.
I did not see that. I have no idea. I'll have to check.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but these guys getting on mechanical horses and hanging out, or what are these guys doing? But to answer your question, I'm gonna give you an incomplete answer.
Okay.
I'm not around there. I used to be around there a little bit, not all that much. I'm not around there at all anymore. So I don't have. Let me ask me that in visit number 3 to HB Mornings.
We'll do. How
about that?
Everybody, let's thank Mitch from Mitch Unfiltered.
Thank you. Thanks for getting me up early this morning.
He did.
I shaved. It was like the old days. I mean, it wasn't like the old days where we started at 6 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning. But yeah, you got the engine going early today.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope you hitting them straight out there when you get out on the course. And what do you have coming up on Mitch Unfiltered? What's going on there?
Well, episode 286. I'm actually, when we get off now, I'm going to work a little bit on it. I have, we're going to do obviously the Mariners no table and some other things. We have, do you know Danny Kelly from The Ringer, who does the
Absolutely.
draft?
Friend of the show.
He had a terrific. We did a terrific segment yesterday about the Seahawks draft, about Michael Penix, about what happened or what didn't happen in the first round. I think people that still are not you're not drafted out, you'll really like the interview that I did with Danny Kelly. We talk about the things that surprised him and what the Falcons were doing and what's going to happen. He likes the Seahawks third day a lot more than I liked the Seahawks third day. So there's Danny Kelly on episode 286 that's coming up on Monday. We'll also do a Mariners no table. We'll see how they do this weekend against Houston and react to that. And then I don't know if you remember, I know how much of a baseball guy you are, Brian, but do you remember the name Travis Schneider? Does that name anything to you?
Vaguely.
So Travis Schneider went to Jackson High in Mill Creek back about 15 years ago. He was a phenom baseball player for Jackson High. So much so that he was drafted in the first round of the Major League Baseball draft out of high school, not out of college. So he skipped college. He was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays. He had a really bumpy upbringing, tough upbringing. It's well chronicled. He became he and Clayton Kershaw were the youngest two players to make it to Major League Baseball when he stepped onto the Toronto Blue Jays diamond. He played 8 years in the league, had some success, did not end up the career that everybody thought he would be, which is the Hall of Fame career. Now he's back. He's back in the Pacific Northwest, and he's dedicating himself to cleaning up the culture around youth sports. And, from parents and how we behave ourselves in the stands, how we behave ourselves with our kids on the drive home, to how we handle umpires and how we volunteer referees and coaching your kids. And we had a great conversation that it's going to be featured on 286. And we segued to his thoughts on the Mariners are classic. He couldn't have retired fast enough than facing that starting pitching that the Mariners. He was talking about Bryce. We talk about Bryce Miller for about 5 minutes on the show. He's like, this guy, and this guy's their fourth starter. Are you kidding me? He watched Bryce Miller the other night. He was texting me. This guy's nasty. I mean, he's filthy, nasty, and he's their fourth best starter. So Travis Schneider, Mariners no table. Danny Kelly of The Ringer will be episode 286. Hoping that you'll listen on your walk with your dog or on some sort of a hike.
Absolutely. Folks, if you don't already, highly recommend you check out Mitch Unfiltered and follow Mitch on Twitter at Mitch_Seattle.
Thank you.
Mitch, thank you so much for spending the morning with us. Appreciate it.
Can't wait for visit number 3.
I'll get your robe ready.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. That was Mitch Levy from Mitch Unfiltered joining us this morning, kindly talking a little bit about a subject that, frankly, I'm a little bit worked up about, and Mitch and I see this pretty much the same way. But interesting to kind of hear his perspective and know that there's someone else out there that talks about the Seahawks and gets the same responses as I do when it comes to our starting quarterback. And then I think a little early for Mitch on the John Schneider and Mike Macdonald side of things. Be curious as things. Mitch is just one of those guys that things will jump out to him that wouldn't normally to others. And so I was curious if anything had happened yet. Sounds like not so far, but we'll see. We'll see on that front. Thank you to Eric Kinnaman for a super chat here saying, have a great weekend. I wish everybody else having a great weekend as well. And, I'll just say this. I think the chat was jumping around during that conversation, and there are folks pretty worked up. I saw people like, I'm about to leave, turn this thing off and not listen. And I mean, look, you should listen to whatever you want to listen to. That's definitely your prerogative. Your attention and your time is yours. I don't want to only talk about things and talk about them in the way that makes people happy or makes everyone feel the same way. I also am not going to specifically just try to find the controversial things that get everyone worked up. I'm not going to be, a shock jock or whatever they're called that's clickbaity, just trying to find things that rile people up. There's enough things in your day that separate and divide people and get everyone angry with each other. I'm not looking to do that. But I will talk about some of these subjects that really confuse me, if nothing else, and then to some extent frustrate me. I'm absolutely going to do that on this show, and I think I will continue to represent what I think is a really important figure and a great figure that we're lucky to have in Seattle sports, and that's Geno Smith. And I hope to God, and I really hope everybody, cheers for every single Seahawk player. Like, it doesn't matter if you've got priors and it turns out you're wrong. You've heard me, you've heard on Real Hawk Talk. We used to do a segment. We'll bring it back at times. Whereas, like, what did I get wrong? What was I wrong about? Because so many of these shows are just so much ego stroking of like, hey, look how right I was about this and how much I'm right and smart and this. And this player I thought was going to be great is great. Or this player I thought was going to be bad is bad. All these people trying to confirm their priors. And I want to always acknowledge that when I'm wrong about something, those are some of my favorite moments, because usually I'm learning something. And especially if I'm wrong about someone being good that I didn't think was going to be good. Those are the best. And quite honestly, I didn't think Geno was going to be this good. I didn't. You can go back and listen to the shows. I wasn't excited. I talked about the Seahawks quarterback room entering 2022 as being the worst quarterback room in the NFL. I was like, Geno Smith and Drew Lock? I mean, this is just a pillow fight. I mean, a competition in preseason. Like, Pete Carroll was talking up this great competition. I'm like, yeah, but between two uninteresting players that have no future at the position, I think Geno Smith, he won me over in a lot of different ways through that. So I like those situations of being wrong, and I'll admit as much as I can every time that I am wrong. And so I guess, I'm one of those guys that really likes the Seahawks quarterback room right now. I like Geno Smith a lot. I'm glad he's our starter. I think we're fortunate to have him as our starter. I could go through a lot of other names of players, quarterbacks for other teams. I would rather have Geno Smith than the majority of other quarterbacks in this league. And I'm really excited about Sam Howell. In fact, I'm pretty protective of Sam Howell. When I hear people saying, the Steelers, they have the best backup quarterback in the NFL, Josh Fields, I'm like, I would rather have Sam Howell than Josh Fields. And you can see I reacted to that as soon as the Josh Fields trade was announced, and people are like, oh man, we should have done that instead of the Howell trade. I'm like, no way. If you give me two quarterbacks, one of them has proven to be an excellent thrower of the football, an NFL arm that can make passes that other players can't make, and the other guy has proven that he is the best running quarterback in the NFL, but has not proven at all that he can throw. Which one do you want? 100 times out of 100, I want the passer. I'm so happy we have Sam Howell. I think I'm defending Sam Howell against other people as well. So I like our quarterback room. And I just don't understand why we can't just be like, hey, Seahawks are not Super Bowl contenders. That's pretty clear. I don't think the quarterback room is the reason that they aren't Super Bowl contenders. I think there's other parts of the roster that need to get better in order for the quarterback to matter enough for us to have it under this much of a microscope. And so, yeah, I'm good. I'm good with the way things are right now. And just hope that I think one of the things that probably grades on all of us, I'll just say it grades on me as a fan. And if you're on Twitter and those kinds of places, which I know everyone's like, it's a cesspool, it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. I've met some of my best friends on that platform. We've had some of the best community. I've met other fans, people from around the world. Like, I've had a lot of really great experiences in building community and finding community on Twitter. But one of the things that's the hardest is, and frustrating, is when you're fighting with your own fan base. When you're fighting with your own fan base about players on your team, and I like this guy or I don't like this guy. I like the situations where you could just kind of go back and forth and give people crap about it, and you could disagree, but it just, it gets so harsh and so black and white. There's no nuance to it that it bugs me. So anyway, I am going to talk about some of those things. I guess my point, bringing it all the way back around, is, I hope that folks that enjoy the show and tune in and support the show, I hope that you enjoy it. I hope the conversations are interesting or get some kind of reaction from you. That's all great. But I'm going to tell you, please be kind and considerate to each other, and definitely be kind and considerate to my guests. There are people that are making comments in the chat. I banned someone today. I'm not going to put up with it. It is not okay to have things to say about the guests that come on this show that take their time, that don't get any money for doing it. They don't get any benefit from doing it other than they're doing me a favor. They're doing us a favor, but for being on here. And if you don't like my decisions about who I bring on as a guest, then you can vote with your eyes and ears and not tune in, or you can not tune in for that episode. But if you are going to disparage anyone I bring on the show, you won't be in my channel, period. I won't put up with it. So I know people have their opinions about all this stuff, but we're going to always try to treat people with respect here, and I appreciate that. So in any event, I got all worked up, which is good. I mean, that's why I do this. I have some more things to talk about, but I'm not going to talk about them in this show. One of the next things I'm working on, I'm doing some research. I was doing it before the show. I might put out an article on it first, and then we'll talk about it. But we're going to talk about another topic that I think drives fans crazy, me included. You're not going to know what it is until I get it out there. It's not about a player. It is about a strategy. And you'll know it when you see it, and you'll know who I'm responding to when you see it posted. But we have a conversation to have, and I'm looking forward to having with you all. So thank you all for tuning in today. I have to, before I go, I can't believe I didn't start the show with this. I got to wish a happy birthday to my lovely wife. It is her birthday today. It is a gorgeous day outside. We're going to celebrate today. We are also going to be celebrating tomorrow. So I'm going to try to figure out when I can do the show tomorrow. As of now, I'm going to try to keep doing it on the weekends. Don't know if the weekends will continue. We will see. I'm going to try to keep doing it on the weekends. I will have a show tomorrow as best I can, although it is my wife's birthday celebration still going on, so that might interfere a little bit. And if you haven't already, give the show a like and click subscribe. The latest count, I know everyone's dying to hear it. Latest count, we are up to 9,985. 15 people away from 10,000 subscribers to this channel. Would love to get there today. I think we can do it. Appreciate it. And let's cross that threshold and get to the next. Become a member on YouTube. Click the link. It is pinned in chat and it's in the description of the video. And become a patron. Patreon.com/hawkblogger gets the audio versions of this podcast, as well as access to the Slack channel and a bunch of other great stuff. Go ahead, support the show. Would appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Brian Emhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Have a fantastic Friday and a great weekend.